Welcome to yet another biology exciting class. I remain your regular teacher, Mr. Daniel Igweme. In our last class, we looked at the brain. I told you the brain is divided into three parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. Then inside the forebrain, we consider the two major parts being the cerebrum and the olfactory loop. Then it has two minor parts, the thalamic and the hypothalamic. So let's quickly go to the olfactory loop. The olfactory loop is a system or an organelle in the brain that deals primarily with smells. It picks up smells, interprets it, and you are able to dictate what type of smell that was perceived. That is why if you look at the function, it receives sensory impulses of smell. Any kind of smell is sent through the nostrils to the brain, and the part of the brain that does that is the olfactory loop, and it gives the exact interpretation. So that is all for the major parts of the forebrain. Let's go to the minor parts where we have the thalamic and the hypothalamic. The thalamic here is an ovoid structure that is attached to the back of the brain. It's just behind the head. It's a small ovoid body, but very, very important. Let's look at its function that denotes its importance. The first function is that it helps in experiencing sensation. Any kind of sensation you can think of is being controlled by the thalamic. Feelings, in a nutshell, you feel about something, person, animal, or thing, whatever you feel for is being controlled by the thalamic. The thalamic is equally the seat of consciousness. You slept and wake up and feel yourself. You can lift your hand, lift your leg, and remember things that happened to you before you slept. It is due to this part of the brain known as the thalamic. Another major function of the thalamic is that it is an intermediate body. It's a link that connects the midbrain, the hindbrain, and the spinal cord. Whatever happens to those parts of the brain is being coordinated by this thalamic. Then it will give an interpretation. Let's quickly go to the second minor part of the forebrain known as hypothalamic. Hypothalamic is just below the thalamic, and what it does is to coordinate all the autonomic nervous system. Remember that when we look at the chart, the nervous system is divided into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Then in the peripheral, we have autonomic nervous system and somatic nervous system. So this hypothalamic controls autonomic nervous system. So that is the area where the central nervous system it supersedes the peripheral nervous system. It is in this hypothalamic. Let's look at its function. The first function of the hypothalamic is that it controls sleep and alertness. That you are always alert, know that your system, the hypothalamic, is functioning very well. It controls appetite or feeding. It makes you know when you are hungry and when you are not. It regulates the body temperature. This is the part of the brain that makes the brain part of the osmostasis in the body. So when the temperature of the body is being coordinated, it means the brain has the ability to regulate the internal environment. Number 4 is that it helps in osmoregulation. So what is osmoregulation? The ability to balance the water content of the body. If there are too much water in your body, this part of the brain will send a signal to the kidney, which we did before, and the kidney will remove the excess water. When there are little water, the kidney will curtail it, so your sweating and urination will be curtailed. Finally, it controls the secretion of hormones in the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is just in the forehead, and it has a lot of functions, which later we are going to look at it one after the other. Now let's go to the midbrain. This is a short region consisting of optic loop, pineal body, and the pituitary gland. So the midbrain is made up of three parts. We have the optic lobe, we have the pineal body, and the pituitary gland. The optic lobes here, from the word optic, has to do with sight. This is the part of the brain that controls vision. It helps you to see, it interprets images, and lets you know what you have seen. Let's quickly go to the function. Optic lobes receive sensory impulses from the eye. When I look at you, before I could know that that is you, the information must travel from the optic nerves to the optic lobe, where it is interpreted. Then I can have a good picture of what I have seen. It generally assists in the transmission of impulses. That is what the midbrain does. Don't forget, the midbrain is divided into three: the optic lobe, the pineal body, and the pituitary gland. Let's go to the hindbrain, the last part of the brain. The hindbrain, alongside with the midbrain, coordinates most of the body autonomic involuntary actions. What are involuntary actions? Things that are done unconsciously, like blinking of eyes, digestion, respiration. Those are involuntary. They happen on their own. The forebrain is divided into three main parts. We have the cerebellum, we have the purge verili, and we have the medulla oblongata. The cerebellum, let's look at what it does. It controls posture or balance. That you are walking straight without tilting or bending is being coordinated by this. That is why when somebody gets drunk, the alcohol tempers with the cerebellum, and you see the person can see a gutter and jump inside because the coordination is no longer there. Secondly, it coordinates various muscle actions in involuntary responses. Finally, it receives impulses from auditory organ. Auditory organ is the ear and the skin. The ability for you to hear very well is being coordinated by the part of the brain called the cerebellum. Now let's look at the purge verili. The purge verili, this is a base band of fibers that consists the lateral cerebellar hemisphere. I told you that the brain is divided into hemispheres. So this is part of the hemisphere, the purge verili. Let's quickly go to the last part of the brain, the medulla oblongata. The medulla is the root of the brain. That is the aspect of the brain that links the spinal cord. It is very important because it controls many involuntary actions, especially those concerned with respiration, heartbeat, digestion. That your heartbeat, the heart will not give you signal that it wants to beat. It beats on its own. So that makes it an involuntary action. Finally, it regulates blood pressure by controlling the constriction and dilation of the blood vessels. Constriction and dilation means opening and closing of the blood vessels. That is controlled by the medulla oblongata. I think with this, I will leave you to go and read up these short notes that I've written on the board for you. Try your hands on some of it. Go to WAEC past questions. See what you can answer. In our next episode, I'm going to give you some homework. But very importantly, go and study the structure of the brain. See how you can draw it on your own. Label it properly, then I'll see you in our next episode. Thank you very much.